Good morning, everyone. We're going to wait just about another minute for other attendees to join this session. Good morning, and welcome to the 4th Annual Inclusive Sports Summit. We are very appreciative to spend this day with you virtually. My name is Tony Price, and I'm the Director of Recreation Services. Joining me for this welcome is Rick George, Director of Intercollegiate Athletics. Rick?
Thanks everybody for being at the summit today. But before we move forward with this Inclusive Sports Summit, we would like to take a moment of silence for all that have been impacted by the tragic events 2 days ago in the Boulder community.
Rick, thank you for that. As we gather for today's summit, we honor and acknowledge that the University of Colorado's 4 campuses are on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, Apache, Comanche, Kiowa, Lakota, Pueblo, and Shoshone nations. Further, we acknowledge the 48 contemporary tribal nations historically tied to the lands that comprise what is now called Colorado. Acknowledging that we live in the homelands of Indigenous peoples recognizes the original stewards of these lands and their legacies. With this land acknowledgement, we celebrate the many contributions of Native peoples to the fields of medicine, mathematics, government and military service, arts, literature, engineering, and of course, sport. We also recognize the sophisticated and intricate knowledge systems Indigenous peoples have developed in relationship to their lands. We recognize and affirm the ties these nations have to their traditional homelands and the many Indigenous peoples who thrive in this place, alive and strong. We also acknowledge the painful history of ill treatment and forced removal that has had profoundly negative impacts on Native nations. We respect the many diverse Indigenous peoples still connected to this land. We honor them and thank the Indigenous ancestors of this place. The University of Colorado pledges to provide educational opportunities for Native students, faculty, and staff, and advance our mission to understand the history and contemporary lives of Native people. Thank you for taking this moment to honor the elders, past and present, of these Indigenous nations. You know, Rick, these past 12 months have been very challenging. The pandemic has drastically altered life, education, and sport as we know it. In addition, our nation and the communities we live in continue to be rocked by racial injustice, inequitable systems, and violence towards people of color. How has CU Athletics continued to keep diversity and inclusion at the forefront, especially for our student athletes?
Well, I think, Tony, throughout this, the most important aspect has been allowing our student athletes' voices to be heard. I think that's been really important in this time. I know that as a person, myself, 60-year-old white male, I can never truly relate or understand how these tragedies have affected the young men and women in our department. So it was important that we became listeners back in May, our student athletes and staff created a group called See United. This group was formed on the foundation of racial justice and social change. The group shares their thoughts with our staff, and we've given them a platform to speak their minds on these issues through what we wear on our jerseys, to what we do in the pregame, what we do on videos, to welcome people into our facilities, and in many other ways. Here in the athletic department, we embrace what we believe is the most diverse group on campus, yet we know that simply isn't good enough. We must continue to push the envelope and get better in this area, which is why we're about to hire an associate athletic director of diversity and inclusion. We think this is an important role for us to have in our department that'll totally be focused on the issues that we've just discussed. We feel like this individual will continue to build on the foundation we have and continue to make us better because commitment to diversity and inclusion has to be an everyday effort, and we're committed to that. So Tony, we've created this partnership in the Inclusive Sports Summit, and it's been vital to the growth we've had over the last 4 years. Can you tell me a bit about this year's theme and what participants will hear?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do so. And Rick, we also appreciate the partnership with athletics, and we appreciate your leadership, your staff, your coaches, and your student athletes in regards to the commitment to improving diversity and inclusion on this campus. Sport and recreation can be such a powerful equalizer that brings individuals and communities together, regardless of background and identity. However, sport and rec in all of its forms still perpetuate a lot of inequality and injustice. Honestly, we have a lot of work to do, and that's why we're here today. ISS has become an established tradition at CU Boulder by providing intentional programming rooted in cultural pedagogy, research, experiential learning, and interactive dialogue. ISS maximizes the many platforms of sport and recreation to strengthen relationships across communities and provide representation through advocacy, allyship, and activism. We would like to thank the 2021 ISS Planning Committee, our presenters, moderators, and all of the support staff who've assisted with the coordination and delivery for today's summit. We are pleased to announce that we have closed captioning for today's sessions. To turn this feature, go to the bottom of your Zoom screen and select the CC icon. We'll also place in today's chat the session presentations so that you can find additional opportunities to engage with the summit throughout the day. Also at the bottom of your Zoom screen is a Q&A function, and you'll have the opportunity to submit questions. And towards the end of this first session, we'll have discussion with our panelists around Q&A. With that, Rick, please kick us off.
Great, and thanks again, everyone, for tuning into this panel discussion. I'm really excited to be with you today and with the three fantastic individuals that I'm going to introduce here shortly. I respect all three of them as people very much in the work they've done, both as administrators and ambassadors of increasing diversity and inclusion in our industry. Joining me today will be Bernard Muir from Stanford, Carla Williams from Virginia, and Allen Greene from Auburn. Bernard is in his 9th year as the athletic director at Stanford. He oversees one of the largest athletic departments in the country and has been a leader in the Pac-12 for many years. In his 9 years as athletic director, Stanford has won 31 national titles, which is a testament to his leadership, and they're consistently competing for the top spot in the Learfield Cup. Carla Williams has been the athletic director at the University of Virginia since 2017 and was the first African-American woman to be named athletic director at a Power 5 institution. Carla is an incredible leader for Virginia, but also leads through her work with the NCAA. I was lucky enough to work with Carla on the Name, Image, and Likeness Working Group and experience her leadership firsthand. Allen Greene is the athletic director at Auburn University, is currently in his 3rd year as one of the most successful athletic departments in the country. His ability to lead and inspire student athletes is truly incredible, and it shows in the work they do on the playing surface and in the classroom. Auburn has experienced much success under Allen's leadership, and there's only more to come from this department. I'm delighted to welcome all three of these panelists in today's discussions. And I'm going to jump right in, as I usually do, with questions. And I'm going to start with Bernard. So Bernard, when you look around most college campuses, it is clear that student athletes are oftentimes the most diverse group of students on the campus. Yet when you look at college athletic administrators, that diversity is lacking. Why do you think that is? And is it realistic to think that a group of non-diverse individuals can lead a group of very diverse individuals?
Well, Rick, first of all, thank you for having me. To you and Tony, I appreciate this opportunity. It's always a pleasure to be with you in our Pac-12 discussions, and then to be on the call with Carla and Allen, who I have great respect for, is a tremendous opportunity. To answer your questions, first off, I think having the lack of diversity across intercollegiate athletics is definitely a concern. Allen and Carla and myself, we were part of a Black AD Alliance too, especially after the George Floyd death. We came together and said we realize this is an issue that we've got to address on our campuses, and we have to address broadly. And certainly we know we need to take more of an opportunity. As you look around our athletic departments, we can be even more diverse, and it's really important that our student athletes have an outlet for them to go to for people that look like them, that they can feel comfortable in various places. And so we know this is a point of emphasis that we need to continue to grow. At the same token, to answer your second question, can non-diverse individuals lead a group of diverse individuals? They can. I think the experience is more enriched when the diversity is all around. And so that's something that I think all of us need to be mindful of, and hopefully continue the dialogue and frank conversations and push the envelope for student athletes and students who are curious about the profession. They can ask questions, and then those people that are in the leadership positions can be mindful and hopefully provide opportunities for them to grow.
Yeah, and just a follow-up question for you or for anybody, but how do we get a more diverse pool in certain areas? I look at the area of fundraising as an example, and there's very few people of color in that business. And so how do we grow that pool that we can, attract people of color to in roles that we have in our department?
Well, I think, and I'll let Allen jump in because Allen was a fundraiser himself going through the profession. But I think the one thing we need to be mindful of as administrators is those student athletes that really have that personality, that go get them, that they could be great marketers, they could be great fundraisers, and start to tap them, see if they're interested, if they want to get into this profession, if they want to pursue that, and then give them the opportunities to grow and learn. And hopefully those are the ones that will emerge and become great fundraisers on our campus if that's what they desire to do. Allen, I don't know, you were once one of those.
Yeah, I can offer a little bit of insight, and I hope it's relevant, particularly for those student athletes who are joining the call today. I remember being a student athlete and not having any idea that there were people who gave donations, and in some cases sizable donations, to have a name on a building or a facility, or to support our academic and athletic endeavors. So I think the first step that we have to take is we have to educate our student athletes and help them understand some of the nuances that happen behind the scenes to help make sure their experience is great. And then to Bernard's point, yeah, there are people, fundraising is more about relationship building than anything else. And certainly there are student athletes on each of our campuses who have this unique ability to engage with people. And if we can, whether they have that skill set or a different skill set, but just expose them to this opportunity. And I think there's another piece to this is there needs to be, and Rick, this is more of an outcome, and I'm sure I'll get into this again, but we need to be able to see people who are like us in positions of leadership, and people like us, and we are, whatever that is, not just Black, not just women, not just gay, not just whatever, just whoever we are. It's so helpful to see our likeness in someone who's in leadership position to help us have the confidence that it's something that we can do, we should pursue, and that there's a path there.
Great. Thank you for that. And so Carla, I'm gonna come to you since you're next up. So we know that college athletics and athletics in general has a huge platform. Millions of people, particularly during the men and women's basketball tournaments in the NCAA, are tuning into sporting events. We've seen a lot of departments and even individuals use this platform in a positive way to promote racial justice and social change. However, this oftentimes comes with criticism. Where do you think our industry should fall in our voice on these issues? And what is your response to those that don't want to see these issues broached?
Well, first, thanks again. I'll echo Bernard's comments. Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Tony, for having us on here. It's always great to be on a panel with Allen and Bernard as well. Our industry has to fall on the side of the Constitution. I mean, there's a First Amendment right that we and student athletes, coaches, individuals have a right to express our views, a right to protest, and so we can't stop it. We shouldn't stop it. What we've worked really hard to do is to educate our student athletes and make sure they understand all aspects of protesting and implications of protesting, and then to support them and to make sure that we've created an environment where they feel comfortable in expressing themselves. And so that has been really important. We tell our student athletes all the time, it does take courage to peacefully protest because there is criticism. And they recognize that and know that going into a situation. And that's how we know that they are really, really committed to the cause. And for those that are critical of that right, that is a part of being in our country, is that you do have a right to express when you do not agree with something. And it's very difficult for me. It should be very difficult for anyone to criticize a young person because they are bringing awareness to police brutality, racial injustice, racism. Student athletes do not want to become a statistic. Our student athletes do not want to be murdered in the streets. They don't want their family members to be the victim of racism or any type of violence because of the way they look. And so they feel it's really important to express that and use their platform to express that. And we support that because we've got on each of our campuses, we've got great young people who are leaders among their peers, and they're competing in sports and getting an education and serving the community. And just like anyone, they have the right to express concern.
Great. Allen, Bernard, anything you want to add to that?
No, that was perfect.
Yes,
Well said.
Pop Carla.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to follow her.
Yeah.
I get that. All right, Allen. So let me come to you then. We also lack diversity among our coaching ranks in college athletics, and they're the ones who interact probably, other than our academic folks, probably more than any other of our staff members. So where do you see the solution to growing diversity in the area of coaching?
It's an excellent point. And it's been brought up several times, and not just in college athletics, but at the professional level as well. And what we tend to focus on, and I was thinking about this with a conversation I had yesterday with someone, we are focusing on outcomes. And I think for those of us who are athletic directors and leaders, we know that there are certain desired outcomes. For us, it's success on the field and courts of play. It's academic success. But in any endeavor, you don't just achieve an outcome because you want an outcome, right? Just because you want to go to the national championship or win a national championship doesn't mean that you do. There's lots of work and preparation that goes on behind the scenes, and typically training and development for an extended period of time to help get you to that point where you are achieving the outcomes that you so desire. So I guess in saying that and trying to apply this concept to sport, which we all know and love so much, is what are we doing to recruit people? What are we doing to help have dynamic practices? What are we doing to help with more playing time? What are we doing to help spotlight What are we doing to help mold and develop? And it seems that there just aren't, and there's enough people who are capable of doing the job. I don't know that there's enough people who are, I'll say, on the track, if you will, right? On this track to start to make progress down this line of being a head coach, an athletic director, a university president, a leader in some shape or fashion. So it seems that we need to spend a lot of energy on our inputs on what is going to help put people in position for these leadership roles, particularly in the head coaching role. And in our case, as the Black AD Alliance as athletic directors, and really work behind, I don't say behind the scenes, but work organically to do the same things that we do to help make someone an All-American. It's the same concept, just in a different format. So just that's a thought that I had.
Yeah, and I know, we've had this discussion before, and I'm really happy to see Kim English get the job at George Mason yesterday, who was here with us, and having that transition for him, I think, has been really good. But a lot of times, the Black African-American coach gets labeled as a recruiter and not a coach, and sometimes they don't elevate that. What's the solution to that? Because you certainly want, it's just like you talk about, you want to have somebody that, in the same image or likeness of you that can articulate to a prospective student athlete. And, I just wonder your thoughts on how do we take away that label and at the same time talk about them as coaches and elevate them in roles that are going to allow them to become a head coach. I just throw that out there. I don't know if anybody wants to tackle that.
I'll jump in. I think because I was a coach and I did the recruiting, and I think that recruiting to me, there are a lot of transferable skills to fundraising, because you are building relationships with people, you're selling a vision, and you have passion for what you do. And so in a way, as a recruiting coordinator or a coach who recruits, that is a valuable asset to transfer to administration. And just like everything, I think it goes back to whoever's doing the hiring. It's our decision. The person who is the person doing the hiring, they can decide who they want to hire. And so there's a certain level of just being intentional in making sure that we set aside any biases to hire the best candidate, regardless of gender, regardless of race, regardless of any differences. And that would take us a long way in coaching and in administration.
Yeah, I would agree. I think also the mentorship that can go on within an athletic department is important. That could come from the head coach, certainly, as they prepare to elevate, to take on a program of their own. But it can come from administrators as well, too, to talk about just kind of the business of sport, looking at the whole entity, not just a particular team that they're working with, but look at the broader picture and having dialogue about that, and hopefully give them opportunities to have some experiences that are different from the norm of just getting a team ready for competition. So, having the donor engagement, which Carla talked about before, was as a recruiter, but putting them in front of donors, putting them in front of your faculty, putting them in front of staff, those are things that they'll have to do as a head coach. And it's great to prepare while you're an assistant and hopefully climbing in the profession.
Yeah, I think, one thing that, they just started this year was the Mclendon Minority Internship Program. And that's given young men and women opportunities to learn our business. And I know we have a young man that's working for us that's doing a phenomenal job and has got a great future. But I think that's another way that we can help give them some real practical experience in our industry. So Bernard, I'm going to come back to you. And the theme of this summit is allyship, advocacy, and activism. And we have a lot of athletic staff, campus staff, even faculty on this webinar today. What are some ways that these individuals can be helpful ally and advocate for growing diversity in the athletics world?
I think the key word is engagement, and having the opportunities that certainly we see on our campuses where you can get to know our student athletes, Student athletes, vice versa, can get to know faculty and staff. You can have dialogue, the issues that come up of the day, and there's so many. And I know that you're dealing with one, a difficult, very difficult one on your own campus right now, but engaging, having sympathy, having empathy, and being able to talk about the issues. We're talking about diversity here, but it could be so much broader. And I think that having taken the time to do that is really important. Carla said earlier about just, pushing the envelope, having the difficult dialogue as it relates to diversity, especially, that should occur. And, I know even on my own campus, I'm pushed by our staff, our student athletes, and sometimes it's a bit uncomfortable, but in the long run, I know it's making our program better. And so we have to encourage that. I think about faculty and having the opportunity to engage in hirings. And Rick, you said that you're just going through one right now. To have the opportunity like that to really probe and say, have we increased the pool as best we can before we make our hire is really important. And that happens for faculty, that happens for staff. And I know you had mentioned you have students involved in this particular hire. That's a great experience as well too.
Carla, Allen, anything to add?
I'm desperate to jump in, but I don't think the ability to really articulate, because these topics that we're talking about and the experiences that many of us are going through, regardless of our position in terms of who we are, who's salient to who we are, not in terms of position, in terms of job. But these things are very complex, and it's incredibly complicated. It's a web of spaghetti, and trying to untangle them is really challenging. So as I think about allies and perhaps ally engagement and involvement, I think we have to enter the conversation knowing that solutions aren't easy. But that doesn't and should not prevent us from jumping in and trying to start to untangle some things. And so I would encourage those out there who are on the call who are either a minoritized group or a majoritized group. Get your hands dirty and be comfortable with that, and be comfortable and expect that it's not going to, these aren't easy solutions. These aren't easy problems, I should say, to solve. And we just have to enter it knowing that it's going to be a long journey, but we've got to be diligent and continue to work at it.
Great. Well said. Carla, I'm going to come to you. And, people always point to hiring practices. And I know we talked about this a little bit as a way to increase diversity, yet even organizations like the NFL have the Rooney Rule, and minority candidates are passed over often. And does a true dedication to hiring practices help solve this issue, or does it need to go beyond that?
I think we need both. I think we need policy. I think that's the framework for everything that we do, especially for those involved in sport and a level playing field. So I think the policies are important, but I think we also need honesty, because the individual that is hiring decides who to hire. And we have to be very intentional about diversity. And there are many qualified, diverse candidates in a lot of positions. And Allen's heard me say this before. I was hired in 2017, but I was qualified to serve in this role long before that. And so the individuals who are hiring coaches, directors of marketing, assistant ADs for facilities, associate ADs for compliance, athletic directors, so presidents and chancellors, we decide who to hire. And so we have to be really honest with ourselves and decide if diversity is important. And if it is important, then you'll make sure that you have a diverse candidate pool. You'll make sure that you do the research to identify candidates that should be in the pool. And then you'll set aside any biases to make the hire that is the best fit for your organization. And so I think we need both. The policies are good, they're great to have, but individuals are making decisions about who they hire.
Great. Anybody else want to jump in on that? Okay. All
Carla
right.
again.
What's that?
It's Carla again.
Oh, that's right. Never
Enough
mind.
said.
I'll stop doing that. All right. Allen, we've talked about strategies on our campus and within our industry about addressing the lack of diversity. But one thing we haven't touched on is the community aspect of where we are. As an athletic director at a school like Auburn, where the community members differ tremendously from our student athletes, and I know we face that in Boulder as well. What are some of the challenges you face, and how do you combat those in order to get community buy-in on these important initiatives?
Carla made this reference earlier, and everyone has the right to express themselves, right, in a way that is responsible. And everyone has a right to object. And I think part of where we as a country get off track is when the desire to express oneself causes a reaction on the opposition, and the opposition's reaction causes more challenge on the other side. It goes down this path of lack of productivity. And so when we talk about, I think the important thing to keep in mind is civil discourse. And this, I think, popped up when Colin Kaepernick took a knee. And we have these conversations with our student athletes about, do you want to have a voice or do you want to be heard? Because those are two different things. If you want to have a voice, fine, we can help you have a voice. You can share your thoughts. And we have to understand that there may be a reaction that isn't exactly what you either want, expect, or even care about, okay? But if you want to be heard, then there's a much different approach to trying to help those who don't see it the way you do have a better understanding. And I feel like in America, and this has been for quite some time, this isn't new, is that we spend too much time trying to get people to believe what we believe, instead of just trying to explain our position with the intent of saying, I just want you to understand. I just want you to understand where I'm coming from. And know that that's a very different place than where, for those of us who are at predominantly white institutions, our fan bases are coming from a very different perspective. And we have to appreciate that those who help support the experience of our student athletes and the development of them are just as important as our young people who are competing. We need both. If you alienate a group, then you may not have the resources. If you alienate another group, then you may not have people may not have people to support. And so we really, really need to think intentionally about what it is that we're trying to accomplish and how it is that we are going to accomplish this. And it goes back to just having civil discourse and this desire to help people just understand. It's really hard to tell someone what they're wrong when they're expressing their feelings, right? That's not a wrong thing. There's no right or wrong. It's just, here's how I feel. And I just want you to understand that what I'm going through is really, really difficult. It's really challenging. I'm struggling. I'm disappointed. And I want you to know that that's how I feel. I'm not telling you that what you think is wrong. I'm just telling you how I feel. And then have some mutual understanding of that. And I think we can make some progress if we do it that way.
You know, it's interesting, we had this conversation this morning and, civil discourse, and we had this discussion between debate and dialogue, and having a dialogue to hear perspectives from a multitude of people is really helpful. And so we had that discussion this morning, and I think it's fitting that you said that, because I agree, we need to have civil discourse. We need to have a dialogue, and I think that's going to be important for us to move forward in so many different areas.
Rick, one more thing here, just
Yes.
to kind of put this into context. One of the things I have found myself saying, and I share this with other people, is if you can have discourse, dialogue, a conversation with someone and walk away saying, I never thought of it that way. Like that is progress. I never thought of it that way. If we can say more of that, then I think we're educating ourselves.
Good point. Anything else to add, or are we not going to follow Allen now because he kind of nailed it? All right, so I'm going to do this, and I'm going to start with Carla. No, I'm not. I'm going to end with I'm going to go Bernard, Allen, Carla. So here's a question. Everything we do in our jobs is to support the student athletes in our program. However, it's also important to support their voice. At your institutions, what mechanisms do you have in place to hear your student athletes' voice and support them when they want to share it? So I'll throw it to you, Bernard.
Yeah, I think the first thing is just being present when you can. You know, we have a number of sports running around, and everyone does at their institutions. And when we can get to games and we can get to practices and we can get to the normal daily lives and interact with student athletes, that's one opportunity in which to engage and hear their voice. We all have SACs groups or something similar on our campus. We engage with them. Those are our leaders of our team traditionally. That's a chance. We've had, especially of late, we've had other groups prop up student athletes. We have a group called Cardinal Black. We've engaged with them. That happened, after the series of events that happened last summer. They came together and said, we've got to talk. We've got to have a voice. And we're now providing a platform for them to share their voice, to share with us how we can get better. But I think the main thing is we've got to be present in their daily lives. And if they want to engage, we've got to be willing to listen and have that discourse, as you were talking about earlier, with our student athletes. That's really important.
Great.
Yeah, I'll go jump in there next, Rick. And Bernard is absolutely on point. And I would say that we do the same thing here at Auburn. A couple of things just to note for the audience here is one of the things I like to do. I think it's great to go to games and support their competitions. If I can, I want to get there early or I want to stay late and try to actually engage, as Bernard said. I think that's the key word, is engage with our student athletes prior to or post competition or during practice or during lunch at the dining hall or walking around the facility, and just trying to have these bumps, if you will, in a way that's advantageous. And I think there's also, because we're having a conversation about diversity and I think about inclusion, it's also important for leaders to recognize that lots of students are experiencing circumstances very differently, right? And so the circumstance that happened in Boulder, people are at different points on this continuum. So you have to try to get to someone's level and try to have some empathy with where they are. I was very, very surprised, and something that I did not think of this way was when we had this summer, we had a meeting with our student athletes on Zoom, and there was a white female student athlete who was breaking down crying because she so desperately wanted to help, but she didn't know how. And so she felt paralyzed, and the frustration and the disappointment of being paralyzed was very emotional for her. And I had never, being a Black male, I had never thought about what it was like to be a white woman, a white student athlete, trying to grapple with Black friends or things that they've seen in high school and bringing all that to the table. So it required me to take a step back and just say, okay, yes, I'm a Black man. I have the Black male experience. We know we have allies who want to help, but I also have to understand where other people are coming from. And that's just one example of where someone else is coming from that we all have to be attentive to.
Great. And Carla?
I agree with everything Bernard and Allen have said, and it's very similar, really, on all of our campuses. I think presence is really important. Presence is a part of leadership. So games, practice, wherever the student athletes are, because we are here to serve them. But we work really hard to create a culture where not only the student athletes feel comfortable in speaking up, but where they feel empowered to speak up and in the subject. So whether it's social injustice, racism, Title IX matters, we've worked really hard to make sure they know that we want to hear from them, and our staff knows that. And so that has been really helpful for us, because the student athletes are in it every day. And so for them to know that they can speak up, I think is really important. And then we have SAC, and we also have a Black Student Athlete Organization as well. And we meet with them on a regular basis, and they're very thoughtful. They have participated in educational programming across the country, which has been easier this year because of Zoom. So they work really hard to educate themselves and in turn educate their peers, their ally friends on different teams. And so that group has been really, really helpful for us. And they've got subcommittees that are working on programming for everyone. And so I would just say that for us, that has been a huge help, because there is an organization that has a mission, a purpose, and they're very, very active.
Yeah, and I think, I guess I'll answer the question too, since I said it was a group question. And one of the things that we did is we created a platform for our student athletes called CU United, where we could hear their voice, and they could work with our staff on how we present our opinions, whether it's on the video display before the game, or whether it's embracing arms with the opposing team and things like that. That's been really helpful for us, and it's something that we know we can build on, hiring a new diversity and inclusion officer. The other thing that we do is it's kind of fun, and we got this. We had a number of student athletes about 4 years ago go to a session. I think Dr. Leonard Moore was the person that put on this summit, and down at the University of Texas. And one of the things that they heard was that the athletic director at Maryland had a thing that he did, and it was called Kicking with Kev. And it was an opportunity for student athletes to have a session with no agenda with the athletic director. And so we do that now here. It's called Rockin' with Rick. And I didn't come up with the name. I didn't come up with the name, but our student athletes, and it's an opportunity, one, for me to feed them, and two, because they'll always come if you get the right food. And so we do that, and we've had great participation, but there's no agenda. We want to hear what they have on their minds. And so that's been a real valuable tool for us. And it's another way that I've been able to engage with our student athletes. And so that's the end of the questions. Now, what we'd like is for those of you that are on this call to please put your question in the Q&A area. Alec is going to read those questions, and then we'll bounce it around to the right people. So Alec, I'll let you take it away, and you can ask the question to whomever you'd like.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you to Alan, Carla, and Bernard. It's been an incredible session so far. The first question we have is, as minority college athletic directors, as any athletic director, you obviously have a lot of oversight of your department, but how do you challenge the status quo on your campus and with your president or chancellor?
I'll try to answer that question. And a term I've used is the business case. And so how do you position a topic, a circumstance, a situation with someone where they can understand it, right? An example would be, I was on a call yesterday with university leadership, and we were talking about the need for collaborative research space, for physical space. Collaborative research is no different than a diverse team, right? And so putting it in context where people can understand it and digest it in their world is one way to try to help people understand a situation a little bit differently.
Awesome, thank you.
I say Carla's is about to say something.
I'll just add to that. Alignment is really, really important, whether it's coaches and athletic directors and presidents or chancellors. The alignment is really, really important to move things forward. And I'm extremely fortunate here with President Jim Ryan, who cares about students, all students, and is very vocal and active in making sure that all students are heard. And he is also a champion of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so that makes it a lot easier for all of us when we have leadership, whether it's us in the athletic department or the university as a whole, when there is great alignment with the leadership.
I'd agree, and I think the work that it takes to have that form that alignment is there a lot of, and we all know this, just spending a lot of time with your stakeholders, the various stakeholders on your campus, and Carla mentioned them, coaches, student athletes, other administrators, getting them all marching toward the same direction is a challenge. And that's a good portion of what we do every day, is just making sure we've touched all our bases to make sure we're moving together in the same, in unison. So not easier said, or not easier said than done, but we definitely try to work at that every day in our daily jobs.
Great, thank you. It's been stated a number of times throughout this panel that obviously student athletes are a very diverse group of students on our campus. However, I think the large majority of that diversity comes from African-American student athletes. So how do we increase the other minority groups, not only within our student athlete population, but also within our college athletic administration?
Again, I mean, I'll take this one first. I think you have to be intentional. You know, I think it's in recruiting student athletes, it could potentially be harder to do because you're at a pool in the different sports of different student athletes of all backgrounds and ethnicities. So, you know, you're always going to recruit the best, right? In that regard. But I do think from a staffing perspective, it goes back to what Carla had said earlier in our conversation, is you have to be intentional. You got to make sure that you have the diverse pool of potential prospects for that job and for that role in your department. So I think, you know, again, I think it's challenging in recruiting because you always, you know, you got to recruit the best. And I think our coaches look at that. But it's a real challenge on you know, depending on the sport. And again, I think you have to be intentional in your hiring practices.
I'll just jump in. I think that just like anything that's complex, it can't be solved at one level. And so, you know, there's a grassroots effort that needs to happen to make sure that individuals are prepared for opportunities. And so whether that's a student athlete that aspires to be an athletic director, there is a preparation process to get there. And if that's a young person who wants to be a lacrosse player on scholarship in college, there's a preparation process that it needs to happen in order to get you there. So that's why it's a grassroots effort. And so we have to look deeper than collegiate sports. We have to look at high school and middle school and youth leagues to make sure that there are opportunities for everyone and access for everyone, because it could be argued that maybe football and basketball are diverse, but are the other sports diverse in any regard? And so I think that, you know, it is a complex topic that requires multiple levels of engagement throughout our industry and throughout our society, really.
That's why we don't follow Carla.
All right, we'll jump into the next question then. And this is a conversation that we have here at the University of Colorado often, is how do we engage with our donors on these topics? Obviously, they are the ones that provide a lot of the resources that we can give to our student athletes, but often these conversations are hard to have with them. And so how at your institutions do you all engage with your donors on these topics that might be difficult to talk about?
Well, I think, you know, donors are not shy. And so if they have concerns about the way we are conducting ourselves or providing the opportunities for our student athletes, they will voice their concern, whether it be through written word or picking up the phone. And when that happens, we try to engage back and create that civil discourse, if you will, explain where we are and what we're trying to do, is explain in light of what's going on in the world, why our student athletes view this as important, and then hopefully come to a position where we respect each other's opinion and continue to move on and know that even if we disagree, we at least have an idea of where we're coming from. And so I think that's the important thing, that we try to listen, hear, discuss, and then hopefully continue our path in moving forward and getting further dialogue, as we talked about earlier, which I think is important.
And if I can just add to that, one of the things that we've worked really hard to do in our department is help our community, our Auburn family, understand that we as administrators, we're not dictators. Our responsibility is to help our young people along their journey. And if we all think back to when we were 18 to 22 years old, we thought we were invincible, probably thought we were right. And now there's so much information, some of it disinformation, that is out there. It's easy to form an opinion on something when you don't have full scope. And so trying to help remind people that let's not judge, right? Let's not prejudge. Let's try to understand full scope before we form an opinion, and just making sure that as we work with our student athletes, our young people, that our responsibility is to them and their journey, and also to the other constituents to help them understand what it is that we're trying to do.
And I'll just add, education is really, really important. And so our fundraisers are the ones who are primarily talking with donors. And so we've been very intentional in having sessions with our fundraisers about diversity, about racism, equity, inclusion, and had actual sessions. So a lot of conversations just to educate everyone, because we can't assume that everyone just knows how to have a conversation about it or understands the origins of why we are where we are. And so I think taking the time to actually educate and creating a safe space for people to ask questions about it has been really helpful for us with our fundraising and connections with donors.
Yeah, and I'll add one thing, and then I'm going to probably close this session down, Alec, unless you tell me that you're going to do it. But one of the things that our student athletes came to us and said, we'd like to have dialogue with our donors. And so one of the things that we talked about, and we're in process of having this discussion, is we have what we call a cabinet weekend, which are some of our higher level donors. And we thought during that weekend, it would be valuable to have our student athletes have a session with them and have dialogue with them on how they feel and hear how the donors feel. And through that dialogue, we think that we can help educate and help people understand, because, again, of the three panelists, I'm the only Caucasian on here, and I don't walk in your shoes, and I don't see things that you see from your perspective. And so I think having a dialogue with our student athletes. So, you get some donors that'll say, well, I'm not going to support, you guys are protesting, but wait a second, let's have a dialogue. And why is that? And what is their reason for that? And having that dialogue both ways, I think, can be very valuable. So we're looking to do that this fall. So with that, I know our panelists have schedules that they have to be. And so I just want to say to everybody, thank you for being at this first session of our summit. This is a really important topic for us to discuss, and there's many more important topics throughout the day. But I want to say thank you to Bernard, Carla, Allen. I appreciate you being on this call. Your perspective is really important, and I think today's session's been great, and it's because the three of you were on this call. So I want to say thank you, appreciate it. And for those of you on the call, please go on and go to our other sessions, because I think those will be important as well. So thank you. Have a great day, and see you all soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.